Billie Holiday was born Eleanora Fagan on April 7, 1915, in a backroom row house at 219 Durkee Alley in East Baltimore, a two-story structure squeezed between a funeral parlor and a lumber yard that perfumed her first breaths with pine sawdust and formaldehyde. Her father, Clarence Holiday, a teenage jazz guitarist still chasing his next rail line gig with pianist Fletcher Henderson, took one skeptical look at a yowling, underweight newborn and drifted back out the door. Her mother, Sadie, barely 13 herself, faced a city that rented apartments only to proper families, meaning a husband's name on the lease. So Sadie packed linens at the Pennsylvania Hotel by day and waited tables at the Utah Street brothel by night, leaving little Ella to meander among neighbor kitchens that lent sugar but rarely affection. She learned early that loneliness can sing, and that song can fill a room faster than money ever will. School offered no refuge. Eleanora stuttered so violently that teachers assumed she was slow. One mocked her halting recitation of the Lord's Prayer, and she fled class to hide inside the cloakroom, humming "When the Saints Go Marching In," because hymns were the only sentences she could finish. At 10, she was raped by a local neighbor. Police arrested her for protective custody, an Orwellian phrase that landed her in the House of the Good Shepherd, a Catholic reform school where nuns believed beatings coaxed virtue from black girls. Eleanora scrubbed marble steps until her knuckles bled, but she also joined the chapel choir and discovered that holding a note past the bar line made people stop swinging paddles. When she left the institution at 12, scar tissue ringed both wrists from forced restraints. Yet her ear had learned something absolutely priceless: how to suspend time with a single held vowel. Mother and daughter relocated to Harlem in 1929, lured by rumors of factory work and by stories of a district where storefront churches sat next to speakeasies pumping blues until dawn. They rented a basement room in a building nicknamed the Bucket of Blood because weekend knife fights always ended on its stoop. Sadie peeled potatoes in a brothel kitchen. Ella washed dishes, then graduated to messenger girl for the madam, delivering moonshine between townhouses while absorbing the piano rolls of Clarence Williams that spilled from rent parties. One afternoon, she finally asked the house pianist, Pop LaRue, if she could sing a number for the girls. He requested something sweet, like "I Cried for You." She countered with Bessie Smith's bar blues, "Tain't nobody's business if I do," stretching phrases behind the beat, sounding less child than world-weary widow. The brothel erupted. Her tip: a dime and advice to lose the pink hair ribbon. That was her first paid gig. By winter 1933, she was haunting every amateur hour stage on Lenox Avenue. Café Loge paid in fried chicken. Pods and Jerry's paid nothing but let her stand by the upright and practice phrasing around drunken hecklers. One Wednesday night, saxophonist Benny Carter dragged Columbia talent scout John Hammond into Monette's, a speakeasy that hid its hooch behind a curtain of cigarette smoke. Hammond heard Holiday's back phrasing on "Travelin' All Alone," nudged Carter, and before the set ended, asked Ella her name. "Billie. Like Billy Dove," she fibbed, swiping the silent film star's first name and combining it with Father Holiday's surname for shiny new stage real estate. Hammond booked her into a studio session with Benny Goodman the following week. She arrived barefoot because her only pair of shoes had split en route. A secretary lent her pumps. She nailed "Your Mother's Son-in-Law" in 1.5 takes and laughed that the first record to bear her name was a mother-in-law joke she didn't even get. But radio got it, jazz bandleaders got it, and Count Basie certainly got it. He hired her for his 1937 tour, tasking her with injecting blues grit into a swing book built for Kansas City roof raisers. Touring with Basie sharpened her disgust for Jim Crow. In Texas, she performed to segregated dance floors, then ate peanut butter sandwiches on the bus because local diners refused to serve her. Basie's trombonist offered her a flask. She offered him a brand new trick, pitch-bending lyrics so that 2 choruses sounded like 4. Their secret weapon became her trademark. White critics called her lazy because she never belted like Ella Fitzgerald. In truth, Holiday was resculpting melody into confession, hinging entire songs on late consonants that hit like side door sobs. Musicians studied her to learn what not to play. If Lady Day hesitated, you sliced open silence for her to pour feeling into. That musical telepathy birthed her bond with Lester Young. He nicknamed her Lady Day, after the way she never wrinkled an evening gown no matter how brutal the bus ride. She called him Prez, because in her world the presidency belonged to the man who phrased with most honesty. Their duets, "Mean to Me," "A Sailboat in the Moonlight," still feel like shared cigarettes glowing in a dark room. January 1939, Holiday walked into Café Society, the first integrated nightclub south of 125th Street, walls painted to parody Park Avenue High Society in blackface caricature. Owner Barney Josephson handed her Abel Meeropol's poem, "Bitter Fruit," already set to a sparse melody. She read the second verse, pastoral scene of the gallant South, the bulging eyes and the twisted mouth, and blinked away tears until the words blurred. She told pianist Sonny White, Play it minor, stay out of my way. Opening night, she closed her set by dimming all lights except one spotlight on her face. After the final note, she dropped her head, and the room remained tomb quiet until a lone patron yelled, "God damn." Columbia turned down the recording. Gabler's Commodore label said yes, and pressing plants feared Southern boycotts. Some jukebox distributors refused to stock it, yet sailors in Norfolk requested it so often that a bootleg pressing emerged literally overnight, selling 100,000 copies out of car trunks. Jim Crow couldn't block a melody once it seeped through the radio dial. Enter Harry Anslinger, former prohibition agent now running the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. He hated jazz, linking it to moral decay, but he really hated black female autonomy amplified by microphones. Internal memos labeled Holiday #1 New York narcotics target. Agents followed her to Newark lounges, to Kansas City hotels, to Los Angeles film studio commissaries where she tested bit parts. They harassed her band, threatened club owners with lost liquor licenses, and warned that any establishment presenting Billie Holiday would be disapproved for cabaret permits. In March 1947, they chased a tip that Holiday possessed heroin in her Philadelphia hotel. She was cuffed without warrant, sentenced without treatment, and arrived at Alderson Federal Reformatory wearing a prison-issued slip 2 sizes too large. She scrubbed hospital floors, assisted in the infirmary, and led night shift spirituals. Guard Rosetta Dodson later wrote, "She sang God Bless the Child so softly we thought the angels might punch out early to listen." Billie emerged with a record, 2 actually, Prison and Vinyl. She scheduled Carnegie Hall for Easter week, 1948. The one venue liquor inspectors couldn't police. Backstage, she fretted over a raw throat. Lester Young hugged her and slipped a cowboy bandana with her initials embroidered. She stepped to the mic, saw 2,700 predominantly white faces, and froze, until she remembered a Harlem brothel crowd who once bestowed a dime for guts. She opened with, "I cover the waterfront," voice raspy but resolute. Critics used phrases like ruined velvet. Billie preferred lived-in sound. The concert grossed $14,000, all hers after expenses. She sent $500 to her former cellmate for commissary credit. Yet survival demanded touring nightclubs, and New York refused to restore her cabaret card. She played small theaters in Boston, Detroit, and Chicago while Anslinger renewed surveillance. To outrun harassment, she turned to heroin again. Smack didn't cure systemic racism, but it at least delayed the anxiety spike before each raid. Lovers enabled, first trumpeter Joe Guy, later mafia man Louis McKay, who beat her yet promised protection. Verve Records producer Norman Granz attempted interventions, scheduling early morning sessions so she'd arrive less intoxicated. The result? Lady in Satin, 1958, often described as a skeleton wearing diamonds. Her pitch wobbles, vibrato wide enough to hide memories, but when she croons, "You've changed," the Hopkinson string section melts behind her like candle drippings. June 1959, Holiday collapsed at 26th Street apartment, rushed to Metropolitan Hospital. Doctors reported liver cirrhosis, heart failure, and staggering malnutrition. Federal agents handcuffed her to the bed, seized flowers as contraband, and posted guards. Woody Guthrie's widow said the room smelled of both sickness and state cruelty. Jazz writer Leonard Feather bribed an orderly to sneak in record player speakers so she could hear new Miles Davis sides. Friends arranged methadone via sympathetic physician Dr. Philip Freeman. Police threatened to arrest him. On July 17th, she slid into unconsciousness. Final visitors swear she mumbled, "Strange fruit," as if checking whether the song still fit inside her lungs. At 3:10 a.m., she died owing the hospital $750. Funeral crowds jammed 145th Street. Mourners included Governor Harriman's wife and a line chef who once flipped her an extra pork chop at Lenox Lounge. Her legacy volleyed between hagiography and slander. Newspapers praised a tragic genius, omitting that many earlier headlines fueled the tragedy. Anslinger retired, never apologizing for weaponizing narcotics policy against musicians. But music outlasts memos. Nina Simone's 1965 rendition of Strange Fruit cracked European charts. Cassandra Wilson stretched it to 8 minutes of modal mourning. Kanye West turned her line, Blood on the Leaves, into an auto-tuned lament for modern hangings and hoodies. In 2022, the U.S. Senate passed the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, the first federal law addressing the terror Holiday sang about 83 years prior. During debate, Representative Bobby Rush cited Holiday's record to underline the nation's delay. Younger listeners find her through playlist algorithms tagging sad jazz, or via the 2021 film The United States vs. Billie Holiday, which dramatizes the FBI vendetta. Some critics quibble historical accuracy. What remains indisputable is the sound, that smear of late vowels, the conversational intimacy as if she's telling you the punchline after everyone else left the table. When contemporary superstar Billie Eilish chose her stage name, she consciously honored Holiday, two different tempos, same insistence on emotional truth over vocal perfection. Even vocal fry, once maligned, is partly Holiday's legacy, proof that timbre scars can illuminate lyrics better than pristine vibrato ever could. Holiday's catalog finally returned to the mainstream in remastered box sets through Columbia Legacy, complete with session chatter, producers cautioning her about mic pop, Holiday teasing them with Bronx sarcasm. Sales surged among vinyl collectors. TikTok teens stitched her "I'll Be Seeing You" over war zone montages and pandemic grief slideshows, showing that a song cut on acetate 8 decades ago can soundtrack Wi-Fi tragedies. Every stream generates fractions of pennies sent to distant heirs, but the more valuable currency might be awareness. Listeners Googling lynching statistics after hearing "Strange Fruit," students writing essays on how a nightclub turned into a legislative catalyst, singers learning that a flawed voice can bruise the heart deeper than octave gymnastics. Billie Holiday never owned a home. Banks labeled her high risk. She never kept consistent royalties. Hustlers siphoned her publishing. But she did own one arena outright, the small space between breath and lyric where honesty punches through fear. In that arena, she turned lynch mob postcards into protest hymns, turned a childhood stutter into pauses that made orchestras gasp, turned government persecution into a cautionary tale that still indicts powerful systems. When you press play on "God Bless the Child," remember it was written after her mother refused her a $5 loan. The next time you hum "Good Morning Heartache," recall she recorded it hours after a pimp black-eyed her. These were not songs. They were sworn affidavits smuggled out of trauma. The FBI file on Holiday closes with a terse note: subject deceased, no further action. History replies with louder ink: subject immortal, action ongoing. Every public reading of anti-lynching legislation, every music student daring to drag a phrase behind beat 3, every oppressed voice that decides to sing anyway, adds another chorus to her unfinished encore. Lady Day may have died with 70 cents in a bank account, but she left equity in something far costlier: the right to stand at a microphone and demand, in whatever weathered timbre you possess, that the world hear what it most wants to ignore. That equity compounds forever, and we, all who listen, learn, repeat, are the silent shareholders.